Your land is my land lol. We've already started construction lol.
What? That land is. As I opened my mouth in surprise, my mother-in-law interrupted me with a shrill voice. She said,
"We don't need a wife who talks back to her husband. Just say you understand."
I didn't know what to say to my mother-in-law, who was looking smug. That land has already been leased to a company, and a new apartment building is planned to be built. The land fee is scheduled to be transferred next month. I thought I had told Steve about it. Mother-in-law, that land is. Every time I tried to tell the truth, my mother-in-law would interrupt me with a shrill voice, saying,
"That's enough. You just need to keep quiet. Got it?"
I finally yelled, "I understand." As I looked at my satisfied-looking in-laws and husband, I cursed them in my heart. Just wait and see. I can't wait to see you cry. My name is Mary. I'm a 45-year-old housewife. I've been a French language instructor for 23 years, taking advantage of the experience I gained from studying abroad for about 2 years during college. I have a fulfilling life interacting with many students every day. My husband Steve is also 45 years old. He became a student at the French language school, and that's how we met. Although I had no intention of getting involved with a student, I rejected all his advances while he was enrolled in the school. However, after he left the school, he persistently pursued me and we started dating. Steve was very gentlemanly during our dates, and our relationship progressed smoothly. We dated for about 2 years and he proposed to me. We got married when we were 30 years old. However, as soon as we got married, Steve's attitude changed completely. At first, we fought a lot, but I didn't have the physical or mental stamina to fight every day. In the end, I gave in more often than not, and it became the norm. Steve has a younger sister named Lori who is 5 years younger than him. She seemed to avoid coming home often. When I met her, she seemed like a brisk woman, but Steve said she was a selfish person who couldn't be accommodated because she was cheeky despite being a woman. As a result, I had little to do with Lori, and even after several years of marriage, I only saw her at New Year's parties. Even after 10 years of marriage and turning 40, Steve and I were unable to have children. We were told by our parents-in-law to get tested at an obstetrics and gynecology clinic, but there was nothing wrong with my body. However, as soon as I reported it, Steve yelled at me with a devilish face.
What? Are you saying it's my fault?
I stammered, "No, that's not what I meant," but Steve was already furious and threw the remote control against the wall next to me.
Don't get carried away. I'm never going to the hospital. You're the one who's weird. Let's change hospitals. Don't ever go there again. Got it?
Steve then left home with only his wallet and smartphone. I picked up the broken remote control and cried. I thought to myself many times that this wasn't the married life I had dreamed of, but maybe I didn't choose divorce because of my fond memories of kind Steve. When I was 43 years old, my parents-in-law told me that having a child at an advanced age was bad for appearances, and I gave up on having children. When I told Steve about it, he just said,
Huh.
He didn't seem to care much, and I realized for the first time that I was the only one who was worried. My and Steve's residence is located about a 5-minute walk from my in-laws' house, and they used to visit us about 3 times a week. To be honest, I didn't like my in-laws very much. My mother-in-law kept making sarcastic comments, and my father-in-law kept talking about my appearance and nightlife.
You know, some important person said that as you get older, your eggs deteriorate or something like that. I'm not saying that Mary's eggs are deteriorating or anything. But once you're over 40, you know? If something happens, it'll be a nuisance for us too, right?
Well, even if they're deteriorating, Mary's style is still attractive, so Steve should be able to enjoy it too.
Gross, Dad.
No one would feel good when vulgar conversations are taking place in front of them. While silently serving tea, I hoped that my in-laws would leave quickly.
You know, I gave birth to Steve when I was 20 and to Lori when I was 25. Oh, it's not like being young is everything, but it's true that younger women recover faster after childbirth, right?
Yuri's still young too, Mom.
No, I mean, compared to Steve's classmates' mothers, I might be younger.
With just a little flattery, my mother-in-law was in a good mood and I forced myself to smile. My mother-in-law was proud of having given birth to Steve at a young age and liked to assert that she was younger than those around her. When someone denied or didn't agree with her, she would treat them coldly as if they were in the wrong. As a result, every time I met her, I had to flatter her and go along with her silent assertion that to be honest, my mother-in-law's appearance is not very good. She is an ordinary grandma with medium build, natural perm, and looks that would make you believe she is over 70 years old. However, she doesn't seem to realize it and thinks she's a diamond in the rough, almost like a beautiful witch.
Well, it's sad that I can't see my cute grandchild, but it's better than increasing the number of useless people, right?
Yeah, that's right. If we don't have children, they'll take care of us.
The living room was filled with vulgar words even though it was my own house, making me feel very uncomfortable. And my in-laws left after saying what they wanted to say and feeling refreshed. One day, I received a call from my father. He informed me that my paternal grandfather had passed away and that I would also receive an inheritance. My father's ancestral home was a well-known family in the area. Since my father was the youngest of 6 siblings and had no particular inheritance to receive, he had lived his life doing what he wanted. As a result, my family wasn't particularly wealthy. However, since I was the only one who could be called a grandchild in my father's family line, my grandfather seemed to have left me some land. The content of the inheritance was cash that included expenses necessary to inherit the land and other costs. I thought for a moment that it was a dream to have enough money to live on even after paying inheritance tax. However, the land itself was too large to build a house on, and I didn't have the confidence to use it well. When I consulted my father about this, he suggested lending it to a company that wanted to build an apartment. I wouldn't have to worry about management and other issues, and I would receive enough money to live my life as I pleased just from the rent. Since it wasn't something that was originally planned to be inherited and wasn't a land that anyone in the family had any attachment to, lending it to a company was decided easily. I told Steve about it. He seemed lost in thought for a moment but said,
I see.
And started reading his book alone again. I thought that was the end of our conversation, but it turned out that Steve had made another plan on his own, which would come to light one day. One holiday, my in-laws came to my house as usual. While I was cleaning up the kitchen alone, Steve suddenly called out to me while snacking on the tea and sweets I had prepared for him and my in-laws.
Your land is my land, lol. I've already requested construction work, lol.
What? That land is. I opened my mouth in surprise, but my mother-in-law raised her voice as if to interrupt me.
I don't need a daughter-in-law who talks back to her husband. Just say I understand.
I didn't know what to say to my triumphant-looking mother-in-law. The land had already been lent to a company, and a new apartment building was planned to be built there. The rent for the land is scheduled to be deposited next month. I thought I had told Steve about it too. Mother-in-law, that land is.
That's why. You just need to keep quiet. Got it?
Every time I tried to tell the truth, my mother-in-law would scream and interrupt me. Finally, I lost my patience. I understand. As I looked at my satisfied-looking in-laws and husband, I cursed them in my heart. Just wait and see. It'll be fun to see you cry. I decided to do something that I had been unable to do for a long time. I renewed my passport, which I hadn't updated for years, and contacted a friend who lives abroad. My friend was very surprised when I told them about this, but they agreed to help me. It was a bit difficult to proceed with the plan carefully until the time limit when Steve would find out about that land, but it was fun as long as I thought it was for my own bright future. When everything was ready, Steve received a timely call from the construction company about the land. One day, when I returned from work, Steve was standing at the entrance with an angry face like a demon.
Did you deceive me?
With that one word, I understood what Steve was talking about. While desperately trying to tighten my cheeks that were about to loosen, I answered Steve. What are you talking about? Steve seemed to be very upset with my words. He glared at me while trembling with anger.
It's about that land. The construction company contacted me. They said they couldn't accept the request because they were already working on another construction project.
Is that so? But I think I told you about it.
What? Isn't it your duty as a wife to follow what I decided? Stop the construction plan for the apartment immediately. Didn't I say, I understand?
I sighed because of his selfish argument and my work fatigue. Steve grabbed my collar and threatened me. However, it wasn't scary for me anymore because I had already prepared myself. It's impossible. Because that land has already been lent to a company.
What?
Didn't we talk about it? The land is under my name, but the building on that land is under the name of the company. It's called a leasehold right. I receive rent for the land but don't get involved in the building. I explained it to you properly, but you didn't understand. Steve seemed not to understand and let go of my hand with a blank expression. While looking straight at Steve, I continued speaking. So let's get divorced.
What? Why would we do that? Are you serious?
Finally realizing that I was quietly angry, Steve began to panic suddenly. While looking at his pathetic figure out of the corner of my eye, I moved to the living room. Steve followed me while watching my behavior from behind, and he looked smaller than me even though he was bigger.
Hey, Mary, I'll respect your plan this time, so please reconsider the divorce.
Even so, I looked at Steve with contempt for his condescending attitude. Steve was completely frightened by my gaze. Why do I have to respect what you decided about the land I inherited from my family?
No.
You seem to be misunderstanding something. You don't have any right to interfere with my land that I inherited. Steve listened to me for a while but immediately bit back when he heard that he had no rights.
You're being disrespectful to your husband. Who do you think is feeding you?
Oh, all living expenses and housing expenses are split in half, so I live on my own money.
What?
Didn't you notice? Were you really not interested? I took out my household account book and opened this month's page. Steve and I put in $700 each for living expenses, and I paid separately for the rent of the room we lived in and public utilities from my account. In other words, even though we said it was split in half, I paid more money. As you can see, I can live on my own, and I'm wasting money just by being with you.
That's a lie.
But you get more than $1,330 as pocket money every month. But since we got married, you've only put in $700 into our home.
My mother said that was enough.
I knew it. This mama's boy is so annoying.
Mama's boy?
Steve seemed upset by my words and rolled his eyes. From an outsider's perspective, Steve is a great mama's boy who talks to his mother about everything and accepts her support as a matter of course. However, he seemed to have no self-awareness at all. Anyway, if you're going to keep living there, please pay for it yourself from now on. I've already changed the account for automatic withdrawal. I won't pay a single penny after today because I'm leaving here today.
Hey, what do you mean by leaving?
Ignoring Steve's words, I took out a suitcase that I had prepared in advance from the closet and headed for the entrance. Actually, the luggage had already been carried out. I had been carrying it out little by little so that he wouldn't notice it, but Steve didn't notice it at all. He wasn't interested in me at all. It was a bit sad but honestly convenient. Steve followed me to the entrance and looked at me while being flustered. In response, I took off my wedding ring in front of him and placed it on top of the counter.
Are you really leaving? You'll regret it.
I replied, "You'll regret it if we keep living together."
Ah. What about my food?
I said, "What? Prepare it yourself." I was completely amazed that Steve was still worried about food at this point. Steve had a very natural expression, but when I replied with a word, he was very surprised and froze with a surprised face. I didn't want to look at Steve's face for even a second, so I left the house where I had lived for 15 years. For several days, I was busy preparing for the future and running around for various procedures. Then, my mother-in-law called me. I answered the phone even though I was annoyed, and I could hear her high-pitched voice over the phone.
Hey. What's this about a condominium being built on that land? And you're divorcing Steve? We've been childless for 3 years and you're leaving us after 15 years of endurance? How ungrateful.
Mother-in-law, the condominium was already decided from the beginning. And Steve and I are getting divorced because we couldn't build trust, and Steve didn't cooperate with infertility treatment.
That child is healthy.
It's strange. I am too. My mother-in-law screamed a key over the phone in frustration at my words, and I found it a little funny that someone could scream like that in a manga.
Anyway, we'll demand compensation from you. It's punishment for deceiving us and making us sad. You must pay for it.
Steve is annoying me with his constant talk about it. Steve will pay you back, so please keep sticking to him forever. Also, Steve is the one who has to pay compensation, so don't run away because a lawyer will contact you later.
What? You're a daughter-in-law.
My mother-in-law continued to scream, but I hung up the phone without caring. It was surprising even to myself that I could say so much when I was fed up with everything. But it felt very refreshing, and I felt like something that had been weighing on my chest for years had become a little lighter. After a month of leaving the house, we finally decided to discuss the divorce. The basic conditions were already decided according to the lawyer, but he said he wouldn't stamp the divorce papers unless I met him. So I reluctantly reserved a restaurant as a place for discussion. My in-laws had stubbornly insisted on their own home as the meeting place, but I refused and reserved a restaurant with a private room. When my in-laws and Steve arrived at the meeting place, they were smiling unnaturally, and I had a feeling that they were up to something.
Mary, it's been a while. How have you been?
I've been good, thank you. As I said that, my mother-in-law approached me with a smile and a cat-like voice.
I'm sorry for everything so far, Mary. Let's talk about the future from now on.
Yes, let's. With those words, I somehow understood the content of my in-laws and Steve's scheme. They probably wanted me to pay them a portion of the land rent or something like that in exchange for the divorce. And as expected, my mother-in-law mentioned the inheritance I received as soon as she sat down.
Hey, do you know the current value of that land over there?
Well,
I was surprised. And you're getting money from other sources too, aren't you? We need to split the property properly.
I laughed at her petty words. My mother-in-law was initially stunned by my laughter, but soon glared at me with a red face.
What's so funny?
Mother-in-law, didn't you know? The inheritance I received is not shared property between spouses.
What?
My mother-in-law screamed in disbelief and opened her eyes wide. It seemed that she had not researched such basic things because she was blinded by the amount of money involved.
Then we won't get a single penny.
That's right. My words were followed by an inaudible scream from my mother-in-law before she slumped down weakly. Judging from my mother-in-law's attire, she intended to use my inheritance to live a life of luxury. It was good evidence that she was saying, "What should we do about payment?"
Don't you want to support your husband's family as his wife?
I gave him a cold look in response to my father-in-law's words that he had been silent about until now. Then I pressed the button on my smartphone without saying anything. From there, my father-in-law's vulgar words flowed out of the phone.
What?
I don't need any of you. I'm living my own life.
Do you think you can get away with that selfishness?
I can even go to court if you want. It's just evidence to submit.
If you do that, my position will be.
Well, it will be socially difficult for you. My father-in-law couldn't say anything back and slumped down like my mother-in-law. When the noisy outsiders finally stopped, I looked at Steve. Steve had a white face, but suddenly had a look as if he had thought of something.
It must be hard for you to manage the money alone, so I'll help you. You can do whatever you want.
I don't know why I have to be involved with you even after divorce. Besides, there are people who will think about how to use the inheritance with me. Come in. When I called out, the door opened and a woman entered. Steve was surprised and opened his eyes wide when he saw her.
Lori.
Long time no see, big brother.
Actually, while I was working on the plan with my friend abroad, I found out that Lori had a connection with that friend. According to what I heard from my friend, my in-laws were very harsh on Lori while pampering Steve. Steve didn't object to their treatment of Lori, and even showed his cunning side by blaming her for what he did in the end. Steve went to a private high school and university, but Lori was only allowed to go to a public high school and didn't receive any financial support for college, so Lori worked to pay for her own tuition and became a freelance writer after graduation. However, when she started working and got on track, my in-laws began to contact her persistently, asking her to support their family. It was surprising when they said they were wary of us because that period coincided with when Steve and I got married. Since then, Lori and I have been in touch many times, and all the tension has disappeared. We have become close enough to call each other best friends. Lori and I have become very close, and she will help me with my French language school abroad from now on.
Abroad? What can you do overseas?
Did you forget my profession? I originally studied abroad for 2 years and spoke French with native speakers every day at work. I have no problem using French, and if I hadn't married you, I would have gone overseas much earlier.
What about me? I can't speak French.
Do you understand what divorce means? It means that I'm going to stop living with you.
Oh.
Steve finally seemed to understand the situation and turned pale. When I received the completed divorce papers from Steve, who had become silent, I left the three of them sitting there and left the restaurant with Lori and a lawyer. I submitted the divorce papers to the city hall and moved overseas. Since my belongings had already been sent to my new home, I was able to start my new life without any problems. I share a room with Lori and we respect each other's work. Lori is becoming a popular freelance writer by writing overseas columns and writing articles about France for local publishers. Actually, Lori's dream is to be a novelist, and I'm thinking that I need to work hard when I see her working hard on stories in between jobs. Steve lived in the apartment where I lived for a while, but he had no savings because he had been playing around until then. He couldn't afford to pay rent and pay me alimony, so he ended up having to leave. He returned to his parents' house, but his in-laws, who no longer received money from Lori, ate up most of his salary, leaving him with no money and doing all the housework that his mother-in-law had abandoned every day. Apparently, my in-laws also need to let go of their house soon because they can't afford it. A large number of messages asking Lori for money were coming in, but Lori smiled and said, "Go to hell," and hung up the phone. I think my mother-in-law, who is still 65 years old, should work, but there are few places that would hire a mother-in-law who has never worked before. Rather, I don't think my mother-in-law will choose to work, so it's likely that my in-laws' house will disappear in the near future. I am running a French language school, which was my dream, and it is thriving. The students are very enthusiastic and full of hope that they will go to France someday. Now, let's study greetings today. Today, too, I stand at the lectern with a smile. I love myself now, who can confidently say that the future is full of hope.